Welcome back. You here with Goldberg. Today we'll be talking about automation, jobs, machine learning, AI, all that jazz. It's been requested a few times. Let me just briefly talk about what you can do if you're really scared and paranoid that a robot is going to remove your ability to make money. It's a pretty simple solution. Work for the government or for an industry that's heavily dependent on the government that directly or in an indirect manner contracts for the government. I made the observation years ago the state is constantly expanding. It's not going to reduce itself anytime soon. And that's for more than reasons of affordability. It's also a question of what is the downside to having a bunch of people without work? Are they going to keep believing in the myth of the system? So we can delve into that in just a second. For those of you who are young, I think they're about to lift the forced injection mandate in the military. So you could go in 4 years, do an office job like IT or something, use tuition reimbursement to start knocking out a degree. You get the GI Bill. If you know how to finesse the system, which some of these guys do, even if they haven't lost a limb or they don't have PTSD, but they still get rated at 100% disability when they come out, which is almost 50 grand a year, tax free, at least on the federal level. I don't know about state. Is it the most ethical? I mean, that's going to come down to you. I was never in the military, so I can't speak from experience. I just know people. I was like, really? You didn't lose any limbs? You don't have PTSD, and yet you are making all that money? It's pretty nice. And then if you get a security clearance, there's more jobs through that as well. So go with the government. You're not going to have much to worry about, and you can start living your life instead of being paranoid about, oh my God, a collapse. Because this is really, it's fear mongering and it's manipulation, and we'll have to address that towards the end of the video. So a few years back, I had done a video on Andrew Yang before he got some following. So naturally, once he did, a bunch of the fans started flowing in, lecturing me on how I didn't know enough about what he was going to do. And I noticed from those folks, they were so adamant that what they heard, this isn't just outcome-based education, was correct. There could not be any other reality there. Then we stopped hearing about AI and automation during COVID. All of a sudden, it didn't seem to matter that much. But most of these folks, for the United States at least, will cite the 47% study, which came out of Oxford or Cambridge, I believe. And it said up to 47%. By the way, why 47%? Such a unique figure. Why not 50 or like 45? It's kind of like how that's a popular number, like Mitt Romney and many other instances. They say these jobs could be. Now, the authors of the study came out and said, just to be very clear, we said could be, not guaranteed to. I've seen other figures out of China and India. It's closer to like 70% that could be automated. So these are definitely designed to make people scared. Well, let's just focus on the United States. Let's say that the worst case scenario does happen and 47% are automated. Only so many people can get new jobs working on the robots or doing the machine learning, all that jazz. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, it means you got tens of millions of people who are at home who don't have any income. Does that sound like a recipe for a good outcome? Now, of course, the immediate clap back from those who have the clap is that, oh, well, yeah, but, they'll have a basic income. Well, but even before basic income, if you're not making money, corporations like Amazon or 7-Eleven or whatnot, who's going to spend at these places? A lot of these chains, especially, there's a phenomenon throughout the United States of Dollar Generals and FDOs, Family Dollars, basically dominating the landscape because folks can afford to shop there. But if people don't have jobs, they're not making money, how are they going to shop? A lot of these corporations would collapse unless the government just decides to be the consumer and keep cutting checks. But even if you give people basic income, $1,000, $2,000 a month, if enough folks have the same income in a particular area, it's going to devalue that money inevitably, right? Because everyone's going to know, oh yeah, they have that. So the purchasing power is not going to be that good over time. And you already have issues with inflation. It would probably lead to a situation where more people would have to have roommates just to survive, which means even less ability to buy property, rent it out, transmit it throughout the generations. So increased gap between the rich and poor, more than likely. But also, if you have all these people sitting at home and getting their little neat bucks, They're kind of angry, dejected. They're going to spend a lot of time consuming material. Some of them might be entrepreneurial on the internet, but a lot of them are just going to be consuming material. They're going to go down the YouTube rabbit hole and they're going to meet people that are talking about why this is not just, it's a corrupt model. And the haves and have nots. Well, especially if the elites who have look less and less like them, that's just going to be, it could very easily be the spark for a populist or socialist uprising. So that immediately becomes a problem. Not just who's going to buy products from the corporations. None of these obsessive AI advocates ever answer that question, unless the corporations are going to like dock income they gave to robots to pay themselves, which seems a little counterproductive. That's a big threat. In fact, there was some memo that was leaked from 2006, I think Citigroup, and these executives were saying America's a plutonomy or plutocracy. But if the people ever figure out, there's a risk because they have the numbers. They're a lot more than we are. That's a significant problem. If you're, whether you want to say the state or the corporations, if people start getting woke because they're not busy on the hustle, trying to grind, trying to survive at a job, they're going to start educating themselves and they're not going to like what they find out. You can only sedate people so much with drugs, or like football or Netflix, they work because people are working 40 or 50 hours a week, so they don't have time to read or to study. They don't want to listen to politics. They want to just be entertained. But if they have 40 or 50 hours a week to just piss around, you best believe there's going to be a lot more folks waking up. At least that's my prediction. Now, perhaps that's why we had the forced injection. That's the population control, because they don't want all these people around. And that could very well be the case. So we'll have to see in the next couple of years how things progress and how many folks are still around. Then we get to a second angle, way of looking at the argument, which is, could this AI possibly be beneficial in some way? I'll just throw out a couple of ideas, and I'm not saying this would necessarily play out, but if self-driving cars were to actually advance to the level where they're safer than they are today, you might have less road rage, you might have less traffic deaths. People would be able to relax and just sit in the car, go to sleep, play on your stupid phone, not be always, hyper competitive. And a lot of the times it's just pure stupidity where people are distracted or they're just trying to have a competition with another driver and it ends badly. So I could see that as a silver lining. I personally, by the way, have no intention of ever getting one of these futuristic cars. I don't even like the current ones with all the bells and whistles and cameras and hyper-sensitive computers that are always on. So I'll stick with my old cars, and if I can't fix the problems myself, I go to the good old masculine blue-collar people who seem to magically rip you off. But it is what it is. So that's one thing. Also, hypothetically, theoretically, if you had more automation, there'd be less reasons for them to import hordes and hordes of people from countries that we don't really want. Just imagine if you had, like, say, a remote setup for some kind of service, you could have Yogi Zero Abs living in his little hovel in Calcutta with his trad wife Pooja, and he does the job. He gets paid like $10 a day, and it serves some baby boomer in a retirement home, but we keep him there. Yogi Zero Abs is not in the United States and affecting people with his mental illness. So it just shows you there could potentially be a benefit. Now, in reality, they just opened the southern border even more. They're probably going to ram through the Eagle Act, which is just a visa giveaway. So that's probably too optimistic. But I'm just saying, hypothetically, it might be a better setup. Although, like I said, I think this is more of an overly optimistic interpretation that won't pan out. So I just wanted to give a little bit of positivity, just in case people think that I'm not being happy enough or looking at sunshine. But now we reach the part of the video that's more important than discussions of how you can protect yourself, or could it be good, could it be bad. And this relates to how many of us are probably just being manipulated once again. There was a political scientist, last name Green, who said something attuned to true intellectual victory is achieved not by transmitting your language to allies, but in fact to critics and enemies. In the context of what we're discussing, you could just say you have a lot of folks walking around using the catchphrases and the arguments of those who are oppressing them. And this is a very tremendous matter. If we go back to early 2000s, and this has happened beforehand, but young people were told, you got to get that bachelor's degree. It's a new high school diploma. You're not going to get a job. It's a ticket to the middle class. Get that bachelor's degree. Okay, so people take out loans, they go do that, and they graduate. The economy tanks. And what's the retort, or what's the justification from the sage of modern business desires, wants, and commerce ability? They say, oh, I guess you shouldn't have majored in that. You should be doing STEM or healthcare. That's what's really in demand. Okay, so people go back to school, take out more loans, they go to coding academies, they go to those medical training programs just to get a job, because God forbid someone would train you for a job. No, you have to have the certificate that you have to pay out of pocket for. So you do that. And meanwhile, the corporations and government are colluding to bring millions of people into the country to undercut you, to replace you. And they say, oh, you're going to have to compete with the immigrants. You're demanding too much money. No, it's not enough. Not that one. And you have to deal with like the caste system they've been importing into a lot of these business environments because, you know, the H-1Bs and all that. So you come across that question, and of course the natural result, especially that lingo, it came out in the 90s, your money or your life, but particularly as people become desperate and they keep feeling like they have to be enrolled in this hustle culture, there's a tendency to embrace the, self-centered fire. You've got to save up all your money, constantly conserve, because otherwise you won't be able to retire. Now, retirement itself is a relatively new concept, but the way it was foisted on millennials is that, oh, you got to just save money. You got to constantly be, I want you to be a top OG hustler. Understand? That's the mentality. You have to always be working to better yourself to be more competitive for the corporate elite. You have to always be running side hustles and making investments. These are the types that are fanatically checking their Roth IRA or their 401k or whatever else they're doing, obsessively hoping that they're going to beat the pack and be able to engage in Wanderlust at a later date. But you think about it, even if you perceive yourself as going against the Joneses' consumerism by saving your money, you're still giving money to the financial traders. And you're still basically resting most of this on the psychological comfort of having a few more fiat digital zeros in your account. And that's what you're living for, is this false sense of security, while oftentimes other aspects of your life have to go by the wayside. Oh, you better not have kids. You can't really afford it. You're not going to be able to retire. Oftentimes, you go live in a tiny house, go live in a van. Yes, I'm guilty of this. Even I have had to wake up. You go and you always be fixated on squeezing the most out of a dollar. And the sad part is when people, they do retire early, but they haven't cultivated any interests. So they have nothing to do. If I had stayed working trades, I wouldn't have had time to produce all these books. I wouldn't have had time to educate myself to the degree that I have. And that's why I always kind of weigh that. I say, do I want a job that maybe is far better income-wise, or there's a balance? The balance is important. You'll see this, like back in October to November, I took that month and I said, I'm going to knock out this cert, which usually takes like 5 or 6 months. I did in 1 month, which was a bad thing. I didn't like it. It was very dry. I find most of the IT stuff very dry, business stuff very dry and uninteresting. But I can just imagine there are folks who literally that's all they do. Their free time is dedicated to making themselves more competitive for the employer. And it's like, yeah, it makes sense, but then it's also this endless match, right? You're never going to truly be good enough. I saw a gentleman, he had a very well done video on how he's protecting his job from automation on the youtube.com. And he's got all these edits and special effects and different camera angles, and he claims he does this by himself. He's not outsourcing it to Eastern Europe or whatever. And he does all this stuff. This has got to have taken 20 or 30 hours to make, if I'm going to estimate correctly. It was released a couple months ago, and he's got 25,000 views so far. Now, back in 2018, when the algorithm was a little bit more allowing, I could put out a video and just mention MGTOW or women, and you get like 20, 25,000 views in a week. And it would go from there. And you probably made more money in ads back then than you do today. But the YouTube algorithm is a very good indication of what they are looking for with this future AI. That you have to constantly be creative, dynamic, eye-popping. They want you to do that at work. They want you to basically live, breathe, crap productivity. That's what the whole goal is behind this. That's why it's so sinister. And people, they talk about it as though it's inevitable. Oh, this has to happen. No, it doesn't. People are just rolling over and they're using the language of those who are taking advantage of them, frankly speaking. They want you to be little more than a buck dancing house chicken for the power elite and spend your whole life as this good, whether it's the consumer version or it's the saver and investor version. That's what they want. They don't want you to have a family if that's something you're interested in, because they can just bring in, the low wages to do that. They don't want you to actually have your own interests and think and study. They want you to be so burnt out, always trying to be the productivity expert. They want you to be something of a corporate slave. And folks don't realize the language they're using. Oh, how it's inevitable. I was thinking about this because I worked hard so that I could buy not a brand new house. It's got its issues. But I've got some land, a little bit of seclusion, some nice views, or used to be. And this is a small community, predominantly white and also black people in a rural area. People trust each other. You can leave your door open. I've done that not deliberately, just my mistake a few times. You're not going to have some red pill alpha running game on you while you're sleeping. It's a nice environment. And then all of a sudden, they rip up the field and the trees, and they dynamite the soil, and they put these cookie cutter houses in place because they say we have to grow. And you look at the bus stop, and you've got the party mix variety, Central American, you got the Sub-Saharan African, the Arab, the Indian, and you're saying, who asked for this? Who actually asked to have all their communities enriched? Who actually said, yeah, this is what we want to vote for, this is what we want to be? And they'll say, oh, it's inevitable, you need it. No, you don't. It's like anything else. These corporate elites, they ruin things, and then they say the solution, which also benefits them, is inevitable, and you can't do anything about it, which is nonsensical. You see, the true answer to all this, because you can say, yeah, I'm going to outpace AI. I'm going to be the most productive expert. I'm going to be the top of the leaderboard. I'm going to have the masters of the trade, the knowledge centers, the greatest egg sperms are going to come and talk with me to figure out all, and I'm going to beat the AI. I'm going to beat the computer. And maybe some of you will. But for most folks, it's not human. It's not a way to live. We talked about for a long time, there was this aspirational idea that humanity would get better, or at least would strive in that direction. And yet we seem to continuously devolve into this scarcity. Nothing can be done. Oh, you just got to barely survive. No, this is the language of your oppressors, and you need to let it go. The answer should be, and this is a reason I may need to get on TikTok. I know it's Chinese spyware, but maybe if I could start putting this out, because I don't see folks really talking about it. Even a lot of left-wingers, they basically repeat the same talking points from the, oh, it's inevitable, oh, we just got to accept this. Both sides really are serving the power elite. They just don't realize it. So it needs to be discussed and needs to be disseminated, because it's time for people collectively to say, enough. We want a world where you can actually grow up. If you want to have a family, you can raise a family. If you are working for a company, you shouldn't have to constantly be paranoid you're going to lose your job. You can work hard, but not be obsessed with, oh my God, this worshiping of growth. That was one of the best things actually that Greta Thunberg said, which is not many. She's like, oh, unlimited growth. And it's true. The addiction to growth at any cost is actually what led to Federal Reserve injecting money into the economy of this. We need to perpetually have high rates of immigration. We need to perpetually look to offshore and trim these costs wherever. It's the deification, the enthronement of greed. And this is not the way people want to live. So that is truthfully, people need to wake up and start saying, no, it's not inevitable. It's not in our interest, and we're not just going to accept it. The economic front is the most important. If they want to enforce this AI, it needs to be very difficult for them. They need to have as little cooperation as possible from all of you, because from economics stems everything else. Your politics, your social fronts, maybe outside of spiritual, but even there, a lot of people, their spirituality depends on their economic position and their outlook. So it has to change. I think it will change, but it's up to those of us who know to wake people and say, look, this is how things are.